From the bizarre set designs to the confusing watch order, Monogatari is an anime that puzzles some while others praise the series' character-focused narrative. The show perfectly captures the cost of knowledge and suffering that comes with living, all while centering around a teenage boy solving supernatural problems that take root in psychological issues. But while that may be pretty easy to make sense of, following the timeline of events, understanding the character motives, and wrapping your head around their conflicting ideologies can be a little more confusing. This video will span the entire Monogatari story and timeline, making sense of the world's narrative while analyzing the psychology and motives behind the beloved characters and their actions. Since the day I first watched Monogatari 6 years ago, I've waited for this moment to come where I could share the impact the anime had on my worldview, and that time has finally come, just months before the release of Often Monster Season. So let's get the first issue out of the way. Monogatari has the issue of a confusing watch order that makes the bar of entry a little high. Adding on top of that, the supposed first season of the series you should watch is Bake, which takes place after 2 of the other seasons, Kizu and Neko Kuro. To add to that, the first episode of Bake has a flashback montage that explains nothing and makes you question if you chose the right starting point. Allow me to soothe that confusion though by saying that this was intentional to make you confused when you enter, and make you carry that confusion throughout the entire first season of the series. This anime loves mystery, even if it has to force it onto you. While that may seem cheap from one perspective, from another it's incredibly artistic. Monogatari is told out of order not because the author was wanting to force confusion, but because the main character, Koyomi Aragi, the person whose eyes are the lens we view the story from, was not ready to share his past experience. Later on, this idea is shaken up as different characters take over the role of narrator, but the same concepts carry. The story is shrewd by the narrator, what we see, a warped perspective. Precisely why scenes throughout the show seem surreal, emotions seem intensified and inflated. Koyomi's arousal a major case of this. You see it through how he views different girls in the series, where his eyes focus, how they're drawn, Haneko's design style altering based on how he perceives her at that given moment. It's incredibly unique, but something that can be hard to pick up on at first. Once you do though, a good amount of confusion can be cleared. From the absence of pedestrians explained by their lack of importance in the telling of the story, to the surreal scenes explained by the fact that this is told with emotions first, logic second. With that cleared up, we can focus on the confusion that comes from the narrative itself, some of which is caused by the non-linear storytelling, some from the complex character psyche and elaborate plot. This video will not analyze Monogatari in the watch order, but in order of the series events, starting from Kizumonogatari, ending with Suruga Devil. Koyomi Monogatari will be omitted till the last episode takes place, and the Shinobu arc will be told in full when it appears on the timeline. Now, if you have no clue what I'm talking about, that is very normal, and I'm sorry, it'll make sense later. Just know that this video will explain and analyze the story and its characters in a linear timeline, starting in March of Koyomi's final high school year, where one life-altering decision leads his life down a path of oddities and apparitions. That decision being to save the life of a vampire. There was a time when Koyomi Aragi would be labeled as someone with a strong sense of justice, a believer in the systems our society has set up to make sure the wrong is punished. But now, due to some trauma, Koyomi finds that being a loner is best if you wish to protect your humanity. This belief stems from a pivotal moment of his first year in high school, witnessing friends turn against one another, using an innocent student as a scapegoat. But this isn't something for us to explore now. That's not this story. All that's important at this moment is that this teenage boy has shut himself off from others for the past 2 years. But all that changes when one person enters his life. The two connect, one desperate to escape her situation and happy to talk to someone about myths and town legends, about a rumor of a vampire in town. The other, while he may say otherwise, is desperate for human connection. Koyomi coins the reason he doesn't want friends is that their negative emotions would affect him as well. We know that this is just a sorry excuse he uses, not wanting to open up about the true reasons he's pulled away from others. That wall does not leave his mind for some time. Haneko adds her contact information to his phone, forcing him to be her friend. While he never says it, his body language signifies he's happy to finally not be alone. At this point, Koyomi has shut himself off, not just from classmates and strangers, but even his parents. Their harsh and strict methods leading Koyomi to believe he's come up short from what they want him to be, resulting him pulling away out of shame and embarrassment. While from this perspective it seems like a very prominent issue to his family, all they see is a boy going through his teen years, unaware of his inner thoughts. Kizu, in the entirety of the Monogatari series, is an unreliable narrator's tale. Like looking back on a memory or dream, emotions can be angsty, intensified, inflated, or unrealistic. All of this story is being told from Koyomi's point of view, how he remembers it, and how he feels like dramatizing it. What we're looking at is an objective reality, how Koyomi wants us to see his world, but some things that at first may seem fiction turn out to be reality. Rumors are a wish for something to be true, and sometimes they carry the power to will them into existence. Hear that being a legitimate vampire. On his walk home from buying an erotic book, Koyomi encounters Kissshot, the vampire queen. Her state, though, isn't what you'd call pleasant. Her limbs severed, she calls to Koyomi to give her his life and restore her strength, which prompts him to do the most logical thing. He runs away. But then he decides to do the most illogical thing. As he runs away, Kissshot screams out in desperation to be saved, her fear of death bringing her to tears. And this is what prompts Koyomi to give his life to vampire. We know Koyomi thinks lowly of himself, and it's as if the idea of being seen as the savior to someone so vulnerable gives him a rush, makes him feel worthwhile when in other circumstances he doesn't. His feelings of failure and societal distrust fade away, his acts of altruism, pure yet twisted, a distraction from his own lack of self-worth. And so with a smile on his face, he gives his life for this vampire he's just met. Only it's not living he must give up, just his humanity. Out of gratitude for giving up his own life, Kissshot makes a last-minute decision to turn Koyomi into her underling, which means he is now a vampire himself. He has a lot of questions about the strange situation he's found himself in, but Kissshot's responses are simply lies disguised as truth, stating that he just so happened to become her servant when she really willed this so. She leads him to take on an impossible mission of fighting all three vampire hunters that took her original limbs, allowing her to regain full power and turn Koyomi back into a human, something that goes unsaid though, which Kissshot realized after Koyomi's selfless act to save her was that she really did want to die, just not in such a cold and pointless way as losing to a group of hunters. What she wanted was a selfless death, giving up her life for her servant, inspired by a haunting memory from centuries ago, a tale of trauma and scars that the vampire queen is not ready to tell, and it isn't the story at hand. This is the tale of her sacrifice that is eventually rejected. The power balance is easily felt. Koyomi is outclassed against the three hunters that near killed Kissshot, but to his rescue is a man obsessed with balance, a man who soon Adaagi would praise as his savior, while the man would reject being anything like that. Oshinomeme mediates the conflict between the hunters and the vampires. Think of Oshino like the middleman in every conflict he can find. He works for pure balance between what are known as aberrations, the supernatural beings like Kissshot the vampire, and the humans. He wants neither to have a clear advantage over the other, and seeing Koyomi get nearly slaughtered called his attention. He contracts 3 separate fights for Koyomi against each hunter for Kissshot's ligaments, giving Koyomi a fighting chance against these hunters. But this service of his isn't out of the kindness of his own heart. It carries a debt of 20 grand. Koyomi decides to shoulder it, beginning his 3-round quest to regain his humanity. Before his fight with dramaturgy, Koyomi distances himself from Hanekawa. Knowing himself and what he set out to do, he does not feel that he is a safe person to be around. He's not oblivious to his own inner emotions, and he's worried somehow he'll harm her, so he scares her away with harsh words and deprecation. He's ridding himself of weakness, he tells himself, but his face shows otherwise. He didn't want to lose the only friend he had, but he's more worried about her safety than his own happiness. Dramaturgy is a representation of Koyomi's mindset, that this is a job, something he doesn't want to stake his life for, yet it's the cards he's been dealt. The hunter gives up when faced with Koyomi's overwhelming vampiric abilities. The job isn't worth his life after all. Koyomi seems a little disappointed he didn't have to smash his face in with a steamroller, but he seems even more disappointed in the fact that he was thinking this way. It's barbaric, yet that primal desire is so enticing, the weight of adrenaline and dopamine. His actions also fill him with disdain. So long as he's a vampire, his humanity is in jeopardy. So begins Koyomi's belief that he is no longer human. Despite his sharp tongue, Hanekawa returns, telling him that she wants to help him gain back his humanity in any way he can. Coming off of his first round win, his confidence is through the roof, so he allows her to tag along with him to the second round against Episode, a half-vampire who hunts out of hatred for that vampiric side of him, a symbol of Koyomi's hatred for his own situation. Hanekawa is a help in figuring out Episode's missed trick, but the reveal costs her life, his annoyance leading him to tear open her abdomen with his crucifix. Koyomi is overcome with rage, his abilities heightened by the adrenaline, sending him flying towards the halfling. He begins to crush Episode's windpipe, but Oshino stops him before the point of no return, telling Koyomi if he goes any farther, he really will lose his humanity. He snaps back to reality, Hanekawa's death re-entering his mind, Oshino offering him a solution for a low cost of 30 grand added to his debt. He gives him the idea to use his own blood, which has healing properties, to bring her back. The final confrontation nears, Koyomi only a few steps from returning to his normal state of existence. He makes the executive decision that Hanekawa should not be so involved in this fight. While she has the most pure intentions compared to anyone helping Koyomi, it's not worth the risk. What Koyomi doesn't know is that deep down she has her own selfish reasons for helping him. This world of oddities is like a fantasy, offering her escape from her trauma and home life, something that will be explored later. Hanekawa goes home, but in a dirty blow, the final hunter kidnaps her under Oshino's nose. Koyomi's afraid and unsure of what he should do. Oshino gives him a grim answer that neither of them wanted to hear. In order to save someone they shouldn't have involved in this world to begin with, Koyomi must sacrifice the one thing he's desperately tried to hold on to, and so he does. In an effort not to relive his experience, Koyomi the narrator glosses over the fight with Cutter, skipping over the details, but all the less it's clear that whatever happened, part of Koyomi died that day, and his belief that he is nothing more than a monster is solidified. From Koyomi's perspective, the task is complete, though something doesn't feel right. How is he, an underling to the most powerful vampire who has no experience, able to single-handedly beat all three hunters, when Kissshot herself could not? It should have been a pushover for her. That is, if Oshino had not stolen her heart. The man who craved balance, even the playing field between the hunters and Kissshot. Had he not taken the heart, they would have been slaughtered instantly. The scale of fate, though, favored the hunters, and they won. Kissshot should have died that day, but then comes in Koyomi, ruining the balance. With this new variable, the hunters are now heavily favored in this story, so Oshino once more steps in, bouncing the scales, setting up individual matches. The fourth and last match meant to be against him, where he would be the hardest opponent Koyomi would face. The man who is able to steal the Vampire Queen's heart. However, Oshino doesn't like unnecessary work. Even without his involvement, the scales will return to balance. Knowing what is to come for Koyomi very soon, the reality of what he has become, and what Kissshot is. They are vampires after all. It hadn't occurred to him the true nature of vampires, their only source of sustenance being human flesh. If they don't eat, they die. So when Guillotine Cutter strolled in and tried to kill Kissshot, she ate him as one would do as a vampire. Such is their circle of life. And this is intentionally revealed to Koyomi by Kissshot. Clear through her conversation on the roof, it is obvious that her desire is to die for her servant's sake. She's been ready for some time, but when lying on the ground dying, she had felt afraid. She wanted her death to have purpose, die doing something she considered selfless, dying for another's sake. To turn Koyomi back to human, she must sacrifice herself, something she could not do 300 years ago, for the man that was her first underling. Only a few years after becoming a vampire, he chose to commit suicide in front of her. The actions haunt Kissshot to this day, feeling she failed him, not ready at the time to die, and is why she never made any more underlings. That is, till Koyomi. Reading his personality, she knows that she will have to push him to discard her, let her die for his sake. So she reveals something about their existence she knows he won't accept, a diet of human flesh. Koyomi's altruism warps rationality. He blames himself for the death that Kissshot has brought upon the world, and not just Guillotine Cutters, the past 700 years of it. He places that burden on his own back, taking the moral responsibility, and considers committing suicide. But there is one thing that stops him from throwing away his life. Stepping in, Hanekawa forces Koyomi to face his issue head-on instead of running away into death. It's clear that Koyomi to her is an escape from her rather dreary life that is still kept behind a curtain from us. But we get hints of why she wants to be close to Koyomi. As for Koyomi, it's very clear that he thinks of Hanekawa sexually, as seen by his choice to enlarge her breasts for the story, something that is altered after Neko Kuro, a choice we'll go into when the time comes. But for now, the takeaway here is Hanekawa has removed Koyomi's desire to escape his problems, and he's in her debt for that. He decides to exercise Kissshot on behalf of all those killed by her hand, precisely what Oshino and Kissshot predicted he would eventually do. Kissshot forces Koyomi to face his hypocritic nature. He knew from the start what she was and what she would eventually do, yet he chose to ignore it. chose to save her despite knowing she'd eat humans. That's just the type of person he is. Someone who would save anyone he finds weak and desperate. Yet when the moment comes and she is no longer that afraid and vulnerable vampire in the subway, he loses that facade, no longer interested in her, choosing to throw her aside, save the future human she would consume if left uncontested. He would kill the same person he gave his life to save. He is, at the end of the day, just a hypocrite with a savior complex. They both know how this will end. The fight between immortals goes on for some time, eventually Kissshot giving Koyomi an opening to kill her and suck her dry, offering her a way to die that gives her closure. But Hanekawa ruins this, catching on to her assisted suicide, explaining the situation to Koyomi before he finishes her off. Kissshot is enraged that she would reveal this, knowing full well Koyomi won't kill her if he knows she is selflessly giving her life to him. That's just the kind of person he is. And so he selfishly ignores her decision, even in the face of Kissshot claiming she will kill thousands tomorrow, hoping this would push him to go through with killing her, but it doesn't change his decision. Koyomi calls upon Oshino to give him a way for everyone to reach a happy ending, but all he can do is scoff. It's foolish to think that everyone can walk away from a scenario happy, but he does know a way that everyone can suffer equally. Koyomi can drink her blood to leave her in an extremely weak state, which would maintain her life and leave Koyomi as an almost human, almost vampire, holding only a few vampiric qualities. However, Kissshot will only be able to feed on Koyomi's blood for the rest of their life, otherwise she'll starve. Humans, on the other hand, will run the risk of leaving alive the most dangerous vampire to walk on Earth, and so all parties must shoulder the burden. No one person must bear it all, such as Koyomi's desire. He wants to escape from the pain being put onto his shoulders, and so Kissshot and Koyomi become something more than a human, something less than vampires. Tied by an unbreakable bond, the two both forced to leech off the other for survival, Koyomi unwilling to let her die, Kissshot pressured into survival. She could choose to starve herself, kill him if she wanted to, but in the face of this reality, she has lost her happy ending of self-sacrifice, and feels trapped to the sad existence that her servant has forced on her. Either could abandon the other at any moment, desert this half-assed loop of suffering they found themselves in, but somewhere inside of both of them is care for the other. Kissshot can't kill the man she desired to give her life for, and Koyomi won't allow anyone to perform a selfless act on his behalf. He's a hypocrite, selfish, yet at the same time selfless. His actions ride this line, and his belief that he should help any and all, while refusing any outside help himself, coats his future actions in contradictions and dilemmas. Sometimes you have to let go and choose who is worth saving, otherwise no one gets what they want. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe it's worse. And so these two begin their crude relationship, coated in scars. It only takes a few weeks for the next aberration to cross Koyomi's path. As Oshino said, now that he's met one, more will be drawn into his world. The instant you acknowledge their existence, they seem to be everywhere you look. The Badia-Meinhof phenomenon, a cognitive bias towards something's presence once aware of it. And so Koyomi encounters a meddlesome cat, playing dead on the side of the road. After Hanekawa helped during spring break, Koyomi has started to feel an emotion he believes could be love, but he's not sure. So he relies on his middle school sisters to help him sort out his emotions, which only makes them seem more convoluted. Tsukihi believes it's sexual frustration and not really love for Hanekawa. Karen believes you know you're in love with someone when you want to have children with them. Both ideas don't really seem to help him, so he leaves to buy an erotic magazine, only to run into the person that is confusing his emotions. On her face, a bandage covering an abuse wound from her father. She doesn't blame him for hitting her, she was acting like a know-it-all in her mind. But Koyomi doesn't think rationalizing abuse is how she should go about it. She explains that neither parent is blood related to her. The mother, her real father's new wife after her real mother committed suicide. The father, the new husband of her stepmother after her biological father's death. Neither person cares about her in any meaningful way, which has led Hanekawa to believe that you can't be family without sharing blood. A sad and somewhat hopeless outlook. Koyomi obviously disagrees, but can't beat Hanekawa in an argument built on logic. They simply must disagree. She makes him promise not to tell anyone that her father hit her. Agreeing, he tries to break the air and cheer her up, which is when the white cat with no tail appears. They bury it. Kiss Shot is no longer Kiss Shot, just a small vampire that's a fan of donuts. The reason behind her rather kid-like nature is that Koyomi is projecting that image on her. What Koyomi thinks of her is what she is, though Oshino and Hanekawa have met her as well, since this pair's lives are now so intertwined. He is the greatest influence on how she's perceived. It's somewhat sad what he's forced her to regress to. Oshino is filled in about the cat, concluding that this is a Sawari Neko, a touching or hurting cat, depending on the meaning we take in Japanese. Both apply well. Oshino goes to check the grave of the cat while Koyomi looks for Hanekawa, but on the way to her house, he's stopped in his tracks. In front of him, a girl with white hair and black lingerie, used to symbolize a staunch opposite in this personality of the Hanekawa we know. While it may appear on the surface that this entity known as the Sawari Neko has possessed her, the reality is much more sinister. This Hanekawa is the one that's been stuffed deep down, the one who isn't proper, isn't prim, talking in very casual Japanese that pushes the line of offense, and she's enacted revenge on the abusive parents. They're not dead, though she wouldn't have cared if they were. Koyomi tries to push her to hear him out, find a solution to this problem together, but the Neko launches herself at him, tearing off his limb. She disappears into the night, off to find more victims of her energy drain, a power she claims she uses to rid her master, in this case Hanekawa, of her built-up stress. Koyomi wakes up to Oshino, apologizing for putting him in harm's way. He tells him to not look into this any further. He will handle the situation, though it's foolish to assume that Koyomi will sit on the sidelines when someone is in need. When the Neko goes out, Koyomi sneaks into her house, where he sees something that scares him to the core. Within the 6-roomed home, not a single one belongs to Hanekawa. Her stuff scattered in various locations, her futon folded in a hallway. These parents treat her like a dog, giving her nothing of her own, letting her simply curl up in the hallway to sleep. This household situation puts fear into his soul, but most importantly, makes him realize how good he has it at his home. While his relationship is not the best with his parents, at least they still treat him as their son. The same can't be said for Hanekawa. Koyomi convinced his sisters to sleep with him because he was quote-unquote scared, so they wouldn't go out and find this cat aberration that's been going around town. The family values of justice has been passed down to his sisters as well, but Koyomi is more concerned with their safety than with right and wrong. At the end of the day, justice seems so bright and clear, but reality isn't so. Neither are the ideals that make up it. The world is full of shades of gray. 20 times he tried to fight the cat, 20 times he lost. Normally a Sawari Neko would not be this strong, but from what he can gather, Hanekawa has combined with the aberration, sharing her knowledge and self with it, creating something new and more powerful, rivaling even the king of aberrations, vampires. Her tactical strategies overpower Oshino, but Koyomi could just maybe pull something off. After all, he's a pseudo-vampire himself. This whole experience has led Koyomi to question whether this feeling is love. It's hard to say, as he rides the line between that and infatuation. He puts this girl on a pedestal for her righteous and morally unquestionable way of living, but from the looks of it, this isn't the true Hanekawa. It's a cover for the black that lies beneath the white. If all she lets out are her good qualities, the bad gets balled up and is turned into an alter ego that terrorizes the town. The Neko confronts him within their high school, acknowledging that Hanekawa has merged with the oddity. The reason the cat chose to help with Hanekawa's stress issue brought on by her home life was that when Hanekawa buried her, she never felt pity or emotion for the cat. Usually the spirit takes advantage of that good heart the people that take time to bury her have, but Hanekawa didn't have that. She simply did the right thing because that's what it was. She gets no satisfaction out of it, no pride, no pleasure. She tells them to stay out of her way. Hanekawa seems to be a person who holds the dark within, only letting out the light, but everyone has both. Oshino is told by the now recovered parents that when the father hit Hanekawa, her response was, "Good fathers shouldn't hit their daughters." It's almost as if she stuffs anything emotional down and just says the most logically righteous thing, taking the moral high ground, which is disturbing when you think about it. She's like a robot with no emotion, lawfully good, ignoring the anger or frustration she may feel for being hit, coming out later in greater form. Oshino doesn't say he agrees with the parents, but he says he isn't surprised. Living with a girl who is always righteous creates a mirror for your own ugliness and immorality. You see yourself as beneath her, even if she doesn't intend for that, and this can cause a strong reaction from others. Koyomi has found himself there as well, looking up to her as an idol of good, an opposite reaction to the perspective compared to the father's. Regardless, he recognizes that this form will only bring Hanekawa and others to harm, so he creates a strategy to separate her from the Swati Neko that acted as a catalyst for her alternative ego. He conceals an aberration-slaying sword the vampire gives him, hoping to slash the Neko and sever it from Hanekawa. Oshino wishes him luck. Koyomi understands the Sawati Neko is just Hanekawa's excuse to let out her true self, that who he really is talking to isn't the oddity, it's a mix of both. So he tells Hanekawa that he hates her, that no matter what she tries to do to distress, it doesn't change her situation, her home life, or what she's experienced. He does this to anger her, but there is some truth to his words. There is nothing she can hope to achieve by avoiding her problems and taking her stress out on others. And Koyomi does hate this Hanekawa, the real version that she's repressed. He has no love for her, yet that Hanekawa that was on the surface, he did love that part, the ideal that she was. He owes that Hanekawa his life, stopping him from suicide, pushing him to do good, so he offers his life up to her, and she takes it. Hidden within his body, the aberration blades, slicing the cat away from its master, but it seems they are linked too closely and cannot be separated. Something going wrong in the severing process, the Sawati Neko fur appearing across her body. The little vampire appears before Koyomi, absorbing the Neko's power and sealing the entity inside of Hanekawa, resolving the situation with the band-aid over the issue. While the Neko's reign of terror has been stopped, it doesn't change the fact that Hanekawa still doesn't know how to deal with her stress, or even to be her true self. She's become something like a time bomb, waiting to blow once again, and who knows if next time Koyomi will be able to stop her. Back as her righteous self, Hanekawa lacks any memories of the events of Golden Week, though she may just be suppressing them. Koyomi can honestly say to himself that he does not love Hanekawa, and what he felt was infatuation for a piece of her, the goodness of that surface level. He held a fake love, it wasn't for the real thing, only the idea that she represented. One day he'll meet someone he can truly say he loves, but for now, he'll just go back to his subnormal life as a pseudo-vampire, and so he climbs the stairs that lead to his next chapter. Introduced in a flurry of imagery are the events of Spring Break and Golden Week, repressed memories Koyomi wants to forget, but also ones he knows he shouldn't, ones that you can't fully distance yourself from, glossed over in fear of the emotions that they'll bring up. While Koyomi on the surface is quite the comedic relief, we know deep down the pain he feels for his own existence. He still holds himself responsible for the events that transpired, and they motivate him to help others. Though be as it may, he can't fix the issues found within. This is a fight one must face themselves, as we'll soon find out. The girl, fragile in mind and in weight, is caught by Koyomi, revealing the fact that she weighs roughly 5 kilos, or 11 pounds. He becomes curious of her situation, given the fact he has experience with those who have odd problems, so he digs in. Not much ground is learned about Hitagi except that she is considered a good student and athletic, but it seems that when beginning high school, she's isolated herself from others. There's a possibility that something happened in her past that pushed her to do this. The profile we thought Hitagi was as clear as day here is different from reality. While Hanekawa talked of her being friendly and kind, the one in front of us comes off as cold and unapproachable. But that doesn't stop Koyomi from trying to help her, even after she puts a staple into his cheek. While Hitagi may think Koyomi doesn't understand what she's going through, when he shows her his cheek fully healed in seconds, it's clear he knows things most don't. Weighing the risk with the reward, she follows Koyomi to the cram school we're all too familiar with, in hopes of regaining her weight.
私を助けてくださるって聞いたのですけれど。
君が勝手に一人で助かるだけだよ。
These words ring clear over all the issues faced in Monogatari, applying just as well here. Oshino isn't a savior, just someone that knows how to set the stage for you to confront your own problems. The weight crab that has stolen Hitagi's weight is just an allegory for her own repression of emotions, yet at the same time a real crab that came across Hitagi's path. All she needs though is a push to confront her trauma and the proper stage. Koyomi and Oshino supplying just that. One out of his kind heart, the other for a small price of $1,000. The weight crab mythology comes from Kyushu, not to say that the oddity of lost weight must occur there, as the weight crab's existence spans past this region. It'll appear wherever it's needed, taking on the burden of emotion for those who desire it. In this case, appearing before Hitagi just before entering high school, as her mother left their family. But that's only the surface of her trauma, a final straw that led Hitagi to abandon her anguish and give it to the emotional crab. Hitagi has always been frail and easily sick. To cope, her mother turned to spirituality for refuge, which isn't an all-around bad thing, unless you don't proceed with caution. Pretty soon, Hitagi's mother found herself wrapped into a cult, estranging herself from her daughter, in too deep to realize what she had become a part of. The two never spoke with each other, her mother's fall from reality hard for her to watch. Then one day, her mother brought a cult leader who proceeded to assault Hitagi under the guise that he would fix her. Her mother stood idly by, praying for her recovery, forcing Hitagi to take matters into her own hands, stabbing the cultist, but her actions tore the family apart. Her mother is sinking deeper into the cult, her father taking Hitagi to somewhere safer. Because she saved herself, her family fell apart, and ever since she blames herself for the collapse. If she didn't stab the man, stopped him from trying to, then their family would still be together. It's the typical abuse victim self-blaming, and while this isn't a great outlook on the situation, as Oshino tells her, if that's how she thinks, those are her own feelings. They aren't for anyone else to bear. Leaving them to someone else isn't the answer. Leaving it to the crab will only bring you shallow existence, avoiding reality. This cues the reappearance of the crab she once met 2 years ago, a crab that no one else but her can see, as this is a mental issue that has been given a semi-physical form. Only those affected, or believing in its existence, aware of the entity. Hitagi finds it in herself to plead for her emotional weight back, the crab returning the painful memories to the girl. For a moment, the crab became impatient, and it seemed as though Oshino may step in and solve the issue. But had Hitagi not stopped him and made clear she would do this herself, her issues could become ongoing. Just as Hanekawa's cat issues was solved by Koyomi, solving another's problem for them will only lead to you becoming their emotional crutch, something bad for both parties. The underlying issue unresolved, just patched, waiting to overflow another day. But if you face it yourself, like Hitagi, you can begin to heal, begin to be whole once more. As Oshino said, no one can solve your problems but you. For Koyomi, Mother's Day isn't a day to be celebrated, but a day that forces him to stare in the mirror at his fractured relationship with his parents. It isn't something that has one singular event to pinpoint, but is more of a slow burn into his teenage years. His mother and father have very traditional morals, and pushed a strict value-based moral structure on their kids. Academics near the top of that list. When Koyomi's grades began to fall in high school despite his efforts, his relationship with his parents took a hit. He believed they were disappointed in what he had become, so he pushed away. Their relationship becoming awkward and estranged, precisely why on a day like today, he tried to abandon ship and flee to a park. Unluckily, his sister Karen caught him in the act and lectured him about showing mom gratitude on a day like today and spending time with her. Koyomi retaliated and left anyway, pissed that his sister scolded him, but more pissed at himself for being so petty and small-minded. She was right in some ways, saying that he'll always be a kid acting like this, that what he's doing isn't a mature way of handling his feelings. He was only thinking of himself when he left, and he knew that wasn't right. Yet it still stands that he has no desire to go home or to apologize to his sister yet. He wants to be left to his own devices here in the park.
荒木くんじゃないの。
After a back and forth, Koyomi shares his frustrations with her, their talk interrupted when Koyomi spots a little girl he saw earlier who looks just as lost as she was then. He goes up to her, asking if she needs any help. She responds with a sharp tongue.
あなたのことが嫌いです。
Koyomi doesn't take this lying down, getting into a full-blown fist fight with a child. After winning against someone less than half his age, Hitagi comes over to see what the hell he's doing. He hands her an address telling her that this girl next to him is lost and needs to find her mother's house. Since Hitagi knows the area, having lived here when she was younger, she leads Koyomi to the location, but somehow, despite having clear memory of the streets, Hitagi finds herself lost, the group wandering in circles. When trying to check GPS, they have no signal. Hours of searching lead to a dead end. She can't locate Mayoi's mother's house. The only one who doesn't seem surprised is Mayoi, claiming that she's a lost snail. She's been unable to find the way to her destination. While Koyomi is on the money that this lost snail is a supernatural aberration, he does not quite understand the full picture. Hitagi offers to go talk to Oshino about the issue while he stays with Mayoi. Koyomi is back at it, only to be caught beating a grade schooler by Hanekawa, who given her very abusive upbringing doesn't question the physical violence as much as she should. When trying to talk to the girl, Mayoi repeats the same statement she first gave to Koyomi.
あなたのことが嫌いです。
Koyomi tells Hanekawa what he's dealing with, and after hearing that Hitagi had come to see Koyomi, she reads the room and sees herself out, knowing from what Koyomi said that Hitagi has grown feelings for him, though he is blind to it, moralistically choosing to ignore it. Oshino lessens the fog surrounding the aberration Koyomi is dealing with. The lost snail, or lost cow as it's called in other regions, is like a ghost and relatively easy to deal with for most people. Given Koyomi's personality though, Oshino knows that it won't be as easy for him and sends Hitagi back to break the news to Koyomi's face. She eases into it, posting an anecdote about two perspectives holding two different truths. There's no method in the world to prove which is right, but it's just as wrong to assume that you yourself is mistaken as it is to assume the other perspective is correct. This can be applied to any situation that involves differing perspectives, like what the meaning of life is, or in this case, is Mayoi real or not? Hitagi cannot see or hear her, yet from Koyomi's perspective, she is as real as anyone else in this world. Neither reality is wrong, but the fact of the matter stands. This entire time, the girl in front of him was the lost snail, and Koyomi was the one affected by it. The only conditionals to coming in contact with the lost snail is the desire to not return home, precisely why Hanekawa could see it too, given her desire to stay away from her pseudo-parents as much as possible. Hitagi delivers the solution to the snail problem, which is relatively easy. You just have to stop following it. But for Koyomi, this may as well be impossible. Given his kind heart and high empathy, Koyomi refuses to leave Mayoi alone like this. She must have said the words "go away, I hate you" hundreds of times, trying to prevent people from becoming lost trying to help her. He refused to be another passerby that leaves the wandering lonely spirit who's been lost for over 10 years following a bus collision killing her, trying to find her mother's home with no end in sight. Koyomi vows not to leave her in this cycle, which Oshino knew would happen, so he had one more idea in mind. Aberrations only know what they know. In this case, Mayoi's knowledge of the streets is based on how it was 10 years ago. Even if the house of her mother is no longer standing, in Mayoi's world, it may as well be there. And so after a 2-minute walk transformed into an hour, Hitagi found the supposed spot, announcing that here it is, leaving Koyomi confused, but not Mayoi, who jumps in joy rushing into the light of the mother's home. Hitagi had initially withheld the information that they can convince the aberration that a house is still standing, despite it being long gone, so she could get more of a read on Koyomi's character. When he had first saved her, she assumed that he did so specifically because it was her, but she realizes that he would have helped anyone in her situation, that it is just the kind of person he is, and she loves that about him. Koyomi, though, doesn't want to think what he did was all that abnormal, and of course he wouldn't. He's the type of person who believes in doing the right thing no matter who it's for, and believes that that is the norm, assuming the best out of people. Despite for years others knowing about Hitagi's ailment, no one reached out like Koyomi did, and it's part of the reason her feelings for him are so strong, though she believes that even if she just saw Koyomi helping Hanekawa or someone else, she would still have these same special feelings for him. Koyomi acknowledges how she feels and says if they're to pursue this kind of relationship, he only wants one thing: for her to promise not to lie or withhold from him again, the way she did with not being able to see Mayoi. He wants a relationship built on honesty, and Hitagi fully agrees. She apologizes for not saying something earlier. It was only out of fear that something was wrong with her again, like in the case of the weight crab. She did not want to acknowledge that as a possibility. Hitagi pushes Koyomi to share how he currently feels about her. He calls back to their conversation on the bench about how the adjective tore should be used instead of moe.
流行るといいよな。戦場ヶ原取れ。
Koyomi expected Mayoi to never return, yet she's been given the role of wandering spirit and chose to remain in the area, a decision made on the hinges of the friendship Koyomi and her share, and a deeper motive explored at a later point. But that's not the story at hand. There's something that requires our current attention. Stalking Koyomi over the past few days, Kanbaru has tried to get closer after finding out he started dating Hitagi. Given the pedestal she puts Hitagi on, she talks as if every subtle thing that comes from Koyomi's mouth is a message from God himself. Surely the man who would date her own goddess would be one himself. Having made little ground studying, Hitagi hands Koyomi Oshino's payment to drop off on his way home. He had tried to talk to her about her relationship with Kanbaru, who had said the two attended junior high together, but the mention of the name caused her to lash out. It seems that in high school, when Kanbaru found out about Hitagi's illness, she used a similar scare tactic on her as she did with Koyomi, but Kanbaru didn't push further like he did, and that was that. She ends it saying that they are different people now and no longer have a friendship, but it seems deep down she feels bad for destroying their bond. Halfway to Oshino's, Koyomi realizes that he forgot the payment at Hitagi's, but that's the least of his worries. In a flash, he finds himself on the tracks, heavily injured. In front of him, a raincoat-bearing demon. No, it's clear underneath the yellow coat is Kanbaru herself, his would-be killer. Hitagi appears in front of him, Kanbaru disappearing. She asks what's happened, not wanting to bring up Kanbaru again, seeing how sharp the name is with Hitagi. He lies, which she is completely aware of. She's not stupid, but she doesn't push any further. Well, not the best idea, but then again, when has Koyomi ever had any? He goes to his would-be killer's home to get some answers to last night's events. Kanbaru flat out admits that it was her who attacked him last night, or in a roundabout way, corrects herself, telling him it was really the monkey paw on her hand. She herself was in a daze, the events that happened like a dream, fuzzy in memory. But that doesn't really explain why.
私はレズなのだ
This makes her situation crystal clear. She wished to be closer to Hitagi on the aberration known as the monkey's paw, which is known to grant the user's wishes in a roundabout way. So the paw is attempting to take Koyomi out of the picture to achieve this goal. Everything seems rather straightforward and tied up, but that's just Koyomi's perception of it. Given the story is told through the altruistic lens of a kind teenage boy, he doesn't question for a moment motives within the unconscious of Kanbaru Suruga, but Oshino does. While Koyomi may represent natural good of the world, Oshino is a chaotic neutral. He plays both sides and in this case is playing for Team Koyomi, the odds stacked against his favor due to his trusting nature. There are holes and half-truths in Kanbaru's story of the monkey paw. She says she was gifted it by her mother, who would later die in a car crash along with her father. She then became bullied at school for being slow, leading to her first wish on the paw, to be a faster runner. But the paw chose to attack the other runners in a race and not just make her faster, which would have been easy. So leads Kanbaru to think it's a monkey paw, but Oshino believes that this is just a psychological crutch to make her feel less responsible. Kanbaru trains from that point forward to be the fastest runner, not knowing how long the effect of the paw will last, not wanting anyone else to be hurt. Years go by and Kanbaru has yet to use the paw since, though it calls to her every so often when she's pushed against the wall and has to rely on herself to fight out. She believes her mother left the paw so that she would have to rely on her own strength and not others. But that seems a very ironic gift if that was the message. Oshino believes this too. Kanbaru would finally cave to using the paw after seeing Koyomi and Hitagi together. He had filled the spot that Kanbaru always wanted to be in. She wanted to make Hitagi smile like he does, be the person she leans on. She curses herself for being a fool and listening when Hitagi told her to stay away. But how could she not? It was the first time Hitagi had ever asked anything of her. Her frustration leads her to the paw's drawer. She does not remember pulling it out, nor questioning the increasing length of the oddity, but she remembers her wish to be by Hitagi's side. Deep in her unconscious, what Kanbaru really wants is for Koyomi to die, to be removed completely from the picture. If the wish was simply to be close to Hitagi, the paw would have granted exactly that, because this aberration isn't a monkey's paw that grants wishes in a roundabout way. It's the hand of a rainy devil, and with a demon, a contract is a contract. 3 wishes for your soul, and it grants your deepest desires, not just the surface level. Kanbaru, deep down, wants Koyomi dead, and her face tells us all we need to know. Oshino cannot be fooled by such an emotional tale like Koyomi, and he tells the boy to question more, wondering why he would take the words of his would-be killer at face value. There's 2 solutions to this problem: either cut the rainy devil's arm off Kanbaru, or let it kill Koyomi. The answer seems simple. An arm for life is a rather fair deal. But while Kanbaru accepts this fate, Koyomi is the one who opts for an alternative. He wouldn't do anything that meant another life would be harmed in the process, even if it meant harming his own. Koyomi believes that with the help of his pseudo-vampire abilities, he could potentially overwhelm the devil in a one-on-one. Given that Kanbaru seems against the idea of killing him, he would only have to fight the arm off, which in turn would void the contract, the devil seeing it's outmatched. Oshino thinks this is a dumb idea, but given his value on neutrality and letting those involved solve their own issues, he lets Koyomi try, though he makes a call to ensure the boy doesn't die, though he does not share this with him as he enters the octagon.
Yo.
At first, the fight seems in his favor. Having to focus on just the left arm should be doable, but a wrench is thrown in the mix. It seems Kanbaru herself still wants to kill him. Koyomi is overwhelmed with attacks, pushed to the brink of death, but the plan will still work if he dies. The wish will be complete, and everyone will get what they want. Only he has to lose something tonight, even if it's his own life. But Hitagi interjects.
随分とはしゃいでいるわね。
Oshino knew that in that room, Koyomi likely would try to sacrifice himself instead of cutting the arm off, so he made a call that he knew would turn the tide. Hitagi questions why it is he lied to her about Kanbaru attacking him that night. He stutters, but she doesn't let him finish. She knows he would have likely chose to go down this same route of sacrificing his own life, even if his body was not regenerative. His actions affect the life of others, even if he doesn't see it that way. Throwing his life away would in turn affect her, having told him earlier she would kill anyone if they murdered him, meaning the surface wish of Kanbaru would not come to fruition and is cancelled. The devil has lost. Kanbaru confesses her love to Hitagi. Hitagi tells her she doesn't love her, but she can still stand by her side. She apologizes for pushing her away. Koyomi stands by watching the reunion, realizing the irony of his actions. This was always something between Hitagi and Kanbaru. He had just inserted himself in, tried to solve personal issues for others. Something he commonly does and commonly fails to fix, usually resulting in him turning into a human punching bag. Surely Oshino found this funny. He knew this wouldn't be solved by Koyomi's truism, but by the mending of a bond. Unwanted favors, interfering where he isn't wanted. This is what he does. He comments that everyone in their own way is perverse, deliberately acting in a way that is contrary to the norm. That may be true, but there isn't anyone that does it quite like he does. Koyomi has been tasked by Oshino to put a talisman on top of a nearby shrine. With him, Kanbaru has been tasked by Hitagi to bridge a friendship with Koyomi after nearly killing him. Koyomi acts as if he's displeased by this, but deep down gets along with her just fine. At the top of the shrine, it's clear something is not right here. Kanbaru gets woozy and scattered around the place are snakes chopped into pieces, staked onto the ground and trees. Seeing this, it finally hits Koyomi where he saw that girl who ran by them before. That was his little sister's friend, Nadeko. Koyomi shares the events of the day at the shrine with Hanekawa, who says it must have been a hard time for him, but not in the way he's running with it. Hanekawa points out to Koyomi that Hitagi has found herself in an awkward position of wanting Kanbaru and Koyomi to get along, but not get along too much. She, at the end of the day, still wants Koyomi to pick her over Kanbaru. Koyomi thinks this isn't a probable idea since Kanbaru is lesbian, but that's just a showcase of the immaturity he faces. He thinks sexually first. After all, he's a teenage boy. What Hanekawa is really implying though here is emotionally, picking to hang out with Kanbaru over Hitagi, that kind of thing. She points out Koyomi's kindness makes him irresponsible, creating an example by going in for a kiss and pausing just before. We can tell that Koyomi didn't necessarily want this, but he also doesn't make any movements to reject it. He lacks the ability to disregard others' feelings for him, something that one day will bite him in the ass. Being wholly altruistic, trying to save and please everyone isn't realistic, and Koyomi will learn just that. Hanekawa ran off after suffering a headache, a sign that the Sawari Neko aberration may be returning to her, though Koyomi doesn't have the time to think about it. Still curious and worried as to why Nadeko is cutting up snakes in a ritual, he returns to the shrine finding her there. He called Kanbaru to assist him with this, hoping that the presence of a girl would make a high school boy coming up to a middle schooler a little less weird, but it's clear that Nadeko wouldn't have had a problem with this anyway, calling him big brother and showing clear signs she has a crush on him, carrying over from all those years ago when she used to come and play with his sister.
さあ入って。
Nadeko shows Koyomi and Kanbaru the scales burned onto her skin. A girl in her class had put a curse on her after Nadeko rejected the boy she liked. Jealous of her, Nadeko had tried to break the curse on top of the snake's shrine, but it seemed to just be getting worse, this problem clearly needing some guidance from Oshino. Oshino tells Koyomi that what Nadeko is facing is a high-class aberration snake, known as the Jagirinawa. But this kind of oddity never should have been able to be summoned by some amateur with a grudge. And what Nadeko did wasn't the wrong process of breaking it either. She was just unlucky in where she tried to break it. That snake's shrine at one point was completely empty, but ever since the events of Spring Break when Kishshot came to town, the place has been a heightened location for malviolent yokai, to the point in which a yokai war nearly broke out. Koyomi putting the talisman on that shrine prevented that though, but nonetheless, that was after Nadeko's snake curse had become a Jagirinawa, and if they're not quick about breaking this, she could die. He gives Koyomi a mala praying bag, telling him to have the girl pray on top of the shrine, and the snake should disappear. But before he leaves, Oshino warns Koyomi of his potential departure. One day, he will leave this place, and Koyomi won't be able to come to him for help anymore. He warns him against getting involved with everyone's issues. As a 1/10 aberration, Koyomi feels that he owes it not just to the people affected by the oddities, but to the aberrations themselves to find a peaceful endings to these conflicts. But Oshino points out the fallacy of this role. Koyomi can walk away from this life as a pseudo-vampire anytime he wants. All he has to do is kill Kishshot like she wanted on that football field. What really is holding Koyomi here is his inability to make a choice that will negatively affect a living being. To every conflict, there is someone who must suffer. Regardless, Oshino knows that Koyomi probably won't change, but he tells him going forward he should think carefully about getting involved. Sometimes it's best to remain on the sidelines, for everyone, something he hasn't learned just yet. The ritual, while long and taxing, goes smoothly until it doesn't. The thing is, it wasn't just Nadeko's friend who had a grudge. It was the boy she rejected as well. A second Jagirinawa strangling her to death. Although he was warned against it, Koyomi steps in and rips the snake off her, but he now has become the target of its wrath, having no business fighting a full-blown aberration. He's quickly put on the brink of death, Kambaru stepping in and forcing him to tap out, the snake leaving the shrine to return to the caster of the curse. As Oshino said, if you curse someone, dig 2 graves. Koyomi has a hard time accepting that. His inability to fight the Jagirinawa means that now a boy will die. But is he really worth saving? Having cursed a girl, why shouldn't he face the repercussions for his actions? Especially if that meant the girl he had cursed, one who does not deserve to die, over turning someone down, gets to live. Koyomi knows that this is the better resolution, yet he can't help feeling as if he's failed. He takes responsibility like he was the one who cast the curse in the first place, which is illogical, but a common pattern for him, even when he's only involved in the slightest amount. Nadeko thanks him, but he does not feel worthy of the words of gratitude. He had tried to save the ones who nearly killed her. He doesn't deserve praise for those actions. Nadeko returns Kambaru's clothes she wore during the ritual to Koyomi and quickly departs after Hanekawa appears. It may be that she was embarrassed or afraid of a high school girl, but that wouldn't add up since she was fine around Kambaru. It's obvious in their conversation that she plays up and praises Koyomi, so the logical conclusion is that she felt embarrassed being caught flirting with him by another. Koyomi, on the other hand, is as absent-minded about Nadeko's feelings as with Hanekawa's, or the more likely, ignoring them out of a hope they will disappear, and he won't ever have to acknowledge them. Still though, Hanekawa's headaches worsen till the day her breaking point once more reaches a limit. Koyomi originally dated Hitagi because she asked him to, feeling a draw towards her but not love just yet, the relationship growing stronger by the day. Their date showed him the soft side of Hitagi and also made him aware of his own. Her father told him he hasn't seen her smile like this in a long time, and how he's helped mend their father-daughter relationship. He thanks Koyomi for all that he's done, but once again Koyomi feels he's done nothing. She did all of this herself. What he doesn't realize is just being there at her time of need is more than enough. Gazing at the stars, Hitagi tells Koyomi that she's given him all she has to offer, and hopes that it's enough. The first time she's openly telling Koyomi just how much she's putting into this relationship, and the two share their feelings under the stars. Mayoi questions Koyomi's choice to pursue a relationship with Hitagi, thinking he would go for Hanekawa instead. He makes the excuse that she doesn't think of him that way, nor does he, in almost denial of the potential that the relationship had before the incident of Golden Week, and before Hitagi had came into his life. There's also the concern of Shinobu wandering around, Mayoi informs him about. Koyomi takes note to ask Oshino about this later, but there's something else that requires his attention first. Hanekawa contacted Koyomi asking him to skip school and help her. He ran into Hitagi before leaving, in which case it seemed that Hanekawa had already contacted her and convinced her to let Koyomi skip, using her absence the day before as ammo to get her to comply. It's odd seeing Hitagi so compliant with someone, but it's clear that she is a bit afraid of Tsubasa. Hitagi isn't as oblivious as Koyomi when it comes to emotions. She knows that Tsubasa loves Koyomi, and knows she swooped in, deep down afraid of what Koyomi would do if he acknowledged the feelings that Hanekawa has for him. But soon she won't have to wonder. It's clear that from the cat ears on her head that Hanekawa's Sawari Neko aberration is returning. Only this time, the point of stress isn't her abusive home dynamic, but her unrequited love for Koyomi. When speaking with Oshino about it, it's clear he already knows this, but he withholds telling Koyomi. He speeds up the process of Hanekawa's alter ego coming out and ties her to the roof so they can deal with the other issue at hand. During Golden Week, they were able to reseal the Sawari Neko by having Shinobu drain the stress manually, but currently, she's missing. Koyomi dispatches a search team calling in favors from everyone he's helped, who are more than happy to return the favor. Oshino wishes Koyomi good luck on his search, and from that moment forward, he disappears into the wind. It was time that Koyomi faced his own problems without his guidance, though he won't know of his absence for a little longer. His search for his vampire companion is cut short by a meddling cat.
なぜいる
Oshino knew he could handle Hanekawa and Shinobu on his own, or more like he needed to learn how to, so he let them both escape the cram school. The Black Ego shares with the absent-minded Koyomi that the source of Hanekawa's stress is none other than the love she has for him. He believes her to be bullshitting. She had given him advice for his relationship, been happy for him, but she points out that this is precisely why her stress got so bad. He was basically rubbing her loss in her face, unintentional. Given the missing vampire, the only solution they face is if Koyomi promises to love Hanekawa, removing the source of stress, but he tells her he just can't do that. He may owe Hanekawa his life as he believes, but he won't allow his debt to her to be used so selfishly for gain. He knows the words from the cat are the words Hanekawa truly wants to say to him, but she'd rather the aberration confesses her feelings on her behalf, in fear of rejection, than saying it to his face. Koyomi finds this shallow and disrespectful to all the people out there that have had to confess their own feelings and face potential rejection, not able to rely on an aberration to be their buffer. Seeing that this solution will go nowhere, the Neko asks Koyomi to step into the light. Koyomi's biggest issue up to this point is that he'll help others, but never will he ask for help, even when he may need it. The people around him, minus Oshino, have forced themselves into positions to help him. Never has he reached out his own hand, and the Neko plans to put him in a scenario where his only way out is to call for help. She brings him to the brink of death, making him believe she will kill him. There's a moment when Koyomi thinks about just letting himself die here. It would solve Hanekawa's problem, but he realizes it would, as Hitagi said, make more issues for those he's close to. For Hitagi, Kanbaru, Nadeko, Mayoi, even Hanekawa herself, his death isn't the right answer, and he calls for Shinobu to help him, which she does without hesitation. The sad excuse for a vampire still has her pride. She won't reach out a helping hand unless asked. She drains the stress from Hanekawa, her face conveying the sense that this was the plan all along, to force him to call for help, call for Shinobu, to put this problem on the back burner once again. The cat had talked as if aberrations and humans could never get along. They should be feared, recognized, but hated. Yet here she is, helping Koyomi put this issue to rest. It may be, just like Koyomi's belief that everyone takes help selfishly, that they are both lying to themselves, lying in order to believe their own values. As ironic as it may be, Koyomi's selfless acts are shrewd in selfishness. Not once has he wanted to be repaid for his actions, and when he finds himself in a bad situation, he'd rather give himself to death than rely on outside assistance. He won't bring others into his problems, into his life, and yet Oshino is like a crutch for him. Each time he goes to the man, it's to seek help to help another. Koyomi is an altruistic person through and through, born out of the dislike of himself. He does not see himself as equal to others, yet he doesn't hold this same belief when choosing who to help and who to let be. He's impartial except for himself, full of contradictions, yet in the end, who's not? No single person on this earth does not contradict their own values, their own beliefs. You say one thing, then you find yourself doing the opposite. Koyomi is, just like everyone else, full of holes, of issues, problems, and trauma. Buried below his good Samaritan actions is just a normal teen, living in the gray, trying to be something better than himself. And maybe that's what he should take away from Bakemonogatari, that his actions, while good intended, still reap consequences that could be seen negatively, that it all depends on perspective. He has to choose who to help and who to throw under the bus. Life isn't as simple as doing what is good. At the end of the day, you can't save everyone, can't help everyone, can't make everyone happy. What may seem like the right thing to do may harm someone else in the process. Regardless, we try to do what we see as just, and try Koyomi will. But reality can be hard to face when met with a conflicting ideal, as comes apparent in Nisemonogatari. As Oshino said, there are no good and bad, only shades of gray and people with circumstances. Actions can be viewed as good and evil much easier than a person can be viewed as such. Is a man who killed someone to save a child a bad person? He took the life of another, yet he also saved the life of another. We can't view each other in such a black and white stance, yet we do it anyway. Such is society. Maybe one day will be different. Oshino is gone, leaving Koyomi with the knowledge he gave him, and with his own long-standing problems, the small vampire, and his selfish choice not to grant the death she wanted. He concludes that Oshino's choice to leave meant he trusted that Koyomi could face these oddities that cross his path alone. What he's experienced over the past several weeks has also made him realize his true feelings for Hitagi, and that the relationship isn't something he should take for granted. Something he did early on, even if he wasn't consciously aware of it. But even if everything feels solved for his friends, his sisters spark problems of their own. From the altruistic acts they enact that rival Koyomi's own, it seems the moral high ground runs in the Aragi family. Since the beginning of summer break, Koyomi has found himself placed in a study regimen by Hitagi and Hanekawa. His aspirations to follow Hitagi to college means that he needs to take his classes more seriously. But as for today, Hanekawa has called off his sessions, so he takes the opening to see the cast of characters and shine more light into their personalities. His younger sister is the first who crosses his path, her feeling of childness still strong as she talks about being a fighter for justice, but cannot define what justice is to her. She believes Koyomi has gone easy on her and their other sister because he's quote-unquote grown up. The real reason is he's afraid of his vampiric strength and doesn't want to accidentally hurt or kill them. His sisters have coined the name Fire Sisters for their constant involvement in any problem at the middle school, which is a constant thorn in his side. They think they're fighters for good, embodiments of justice, but their motives are not their own, as we'll learn, finding their beliefs and ideals in others, easily influenced by how others think since they don't define good for themselves. They see things as black and white, something Koyomi has grown out of. Maybe he has matured, but he has yet to reach the title of adult. He still faces his own denial of what's around him, shown through his interactions with Nadeko. Over the phone, she's extremely desperate in getting him to come to her home as quickly as possible. Since Tsukihi had been close with her through childhood, Koyomi asks her to come. She makes clear that she does not want to get involved, as Nadeko would much rather see Koyomi alone. He seems to not understand what Tsukihi is implying, but really he's just feigning ignorance, as will become clearer and clearer. Almost as if to disprove the earlier idea that Koyomi has gone and grown up, Mayoi appears before him. Within this embodiment of his youth is rather mature ideals, telling Koyomi to burden the knowledge of the supernatural and not dump it on his family. It's a secret best kept to protect them, and if they were ever to find themselves involved one day, he'd be there to walk them back. There's only two people that Koyomi talks about his own problems with like he does here, Mayoi and Shinobu. Never does he share what he's going through with the others he's helped. Maybe this is because Mayoi and Shinobu are supernatural extensions of himself that he feels comfortable talking to them. Or maybe he's too busy being the rock for everyone else that there's no time for him to express his own conflictions. Either way, the unique bond between these two is clear. Nadeko comes onto Koyomi in any possible way, from wearing very revealing, girly clothes, telling Koyomi he has to take off his sweatshirt, the game she wants to play. Koyomi is confused if Nadeko knows what she's doing or if she's just pretending not to know. He himself feigning his own ignorance to her tactics, refusing to acknowledge this middle school girl's feelings for him, and refusing to feel any sort of way about her. Nadeko's mom comes home suddenly, scaring Nadeko, afraid of what she'll think of this situation, aka her trying to push herself onto a high school boy while playing Twister in a very unfriendly Twister outfit. On his walk back, Koyomi wholeheartedly believes that her mother's surprise appearance saved him from something, though he won't admit to himself what that is, feigning ignorance not just to us, but himself as well. What's more perplexing though was Nadeko's insistence that Koyomi did not look in her passcode locked closet. Very strange thing for her to have, something that will come to play at a later date, but also something that fits within her personality. Nadeko is the type of person to get her way through being ditzy yet forceful, clear from her conversation on the phone and insistence on Koyomi's actions at her house. She trips you into doing things her way, and if she doesn't get her way, well, that just never happens. But it just may, later. For now, you'll just have to be left in the dark. Koyomi and Kanburu have an odd relationship, building off of her original desire to murder him and their forced friendship by Hitagi. They come out of that with a rather close, rather strange bond, one that sometimes goes a bit too far as Kanburu borderline assaults Koyomi for questioning her love for boys' love novels. You can look those up in your own time, I won't ruin it. Kanburu tells Koyomi that he needs to be careful around his relationships with others as it's easy to take advantage of his kindness, Nadeko even being brought up as a reference to this. Running parallel to his own people issues, the odd relationship relationship between Hitagi and Hanekawa is referenced, which will become more clear moving forward. From an outsider's view, it's as if Hitagi is praying to some god to avoid her vengeful wrath. This is built on her fear that if Hanekawa makes a move on Koyomi, that he will choose the cat girl over her. This idea comes from Hitagi's own lack of self-confidence. She doesn't really have a reason to assume this. While she may act tough on the outside, her real persona is soft and delicate. After cleaning her room, Koyomi departs, but while he was being assaulted by his dear Kohai, his sister has been busy playing her game of justice, which just so happens to end very poorly. After tracing the rumors of a charmed salesman to the issues surrounding their middle school, the Fire Sisters, with the help of Hanekawa, find the culprit Kaiki, who Karen ignorantly confronts on her own. She tries to use her ideals of justice to influence Kaiki, but to a man like him who does not believe in such black and white concepts as she does, she cannot back her own statements. Kaiki makes her doubt what's important in the world. For him, this is money, the root of everything good and evil. He claims that he isn't a bad guy. All he does is sell charms. He doesn't create the malice that some might have. The outcomes, whether good or bad, are the faults of the middle schoolers that come to him.
お前は善行を積むことで心を満たし、俺は悪行を積むことで貯金通帳を満たす。そこにどれほどの違いがある?
Questioning what is good, what is evil, who is right, who is wrong. Karen doesn't seem to get it, so she just continues to repeat that she'll fight him. Kaiki doesn't want that. Again, Karen acts as a broken record. It's clear to us that she has no understanding of what she's fighting for. She doesn't question the different sides of the situations she inserts herself in. She doesn't question the motives of those involved. She acts without thinking, and that is why she's weak. That's why she loses to a con man with no morals. He hypnotizes her into believing she's been stung by a wreath fire bee, leaving her body heavy, a high fever, and also with no money. A service for a service, he says. Even if it's not in her favor, he deserves payment. She's left there to be found by Hanekawa and Tsukihi. Kaiki walks to Kambaru's house to check on something he promised an old friend. The two cross paths, Koyomi asking if he needs something, Kaiki expressing that he heard the daughter of Gaian lives here, but it looks like he doesn't need to worry about it. Her rainy devil problem already had been solved. Kambaru's relation to Kaiki will become clear when it's necessary. For now, it's simply left as a throwaway comment. The mystery of Kaiki becomes more alluring, yet despite this, Koyomi does not follow him, sensing that getting involved with that man could only bring trouble. He felt as if he was a mix between Oshino and Guillotine Cutter, the worst parts from both. He heads home. Koyomi mentions to Hitagi that he saw a strange, ill-omened man. Hitagi's response to this information, a kidnapping, chaining Koyomi in the cram school for his safety, as she claims. While she does look like she enjoys keeping him chained up and playing with him, she is telling the truth. Her past experience with Kaiki has left her very cautious and afraid of that man. She knows that he is a bad match for Koyomi's personality, and her desire to kill him for what he had did to her is strong. This desire comes from him being the first man to con her family, promising to rid her of the weightless crab. He had extorted money from her father and eventually left without fixing anything, which was followed by the family divorce. She blames him for all that happened to her family, a simple scapegoat for the weight she initially had put on herself, and so she desires revenge. How she speaks of things isn't what Kaiki remembers of their short time together a few years ago, but that's a different tale. This is one about the false sisters, and one of them is suffering from a serious illness that Koyomi has just been made aware of. At any point, Koyomi could have left this crammed school, staying out of respect for Hitagi, but now with a person in need of his help, he must go. Hitagi isn't afraid of fighting him to keep him from leaving, but this is interrupted by a phone call she gets from Hanekawa. We don't hear what's said, but we can tell by Hitagi's mannerisms that scales of power favor Hanekawa. Hanging up, she concedes to Koyomi, apologizing, something she normally wouldn't do. No witty comeback or box cutter to his neck, she really just caves. It's clear the relationship between the two is strange. Koyomi lectures his sisters for being reckless, that they are not strong, which is why they fall short. They are not heroes because they are right. A hero does not lose, they are strong. These two are fake heroes, but they don't understand that. They assume Koyomi is talking strong physically, but what he is truly implying is strong in will, something they don't even consider. They have much to learn. Hanekawa mentions the opposing way Koyomi worries about her compared to his sisters, and frankly anyone for that matter. He's more desperate and brash, yet with her he's gentle, which is precisely why Hitagi feels threatened by their relationship. It's unique, different. For Koyomi, this is because he believes he owes Hanekawa his life, but that really is just what he says out loud. He does deeply care for her, even if he does not see her as a romantical partner. Her outreaching friendship and help during the story of Kizu, which led him to respect and care for her, followed by the events of Golden Week, which led him to be cautious and understanding of her underlying faults. We also get a little more information on the strange relationship between Hitagi and her through the words she said on the phone.
引き分けがないようだと 私が荒木くんに告っちゃうぞって。
To this day, Hanikawa won't just outright say she loves Koyomi, even when this is the second time it's been said in a roundabout way. Similar to Nadeko, he feigns from responding, choosing to let it play off rather than address it. He's too kind to reject Nadeko and, more seriously, Hanikawa's feelings, and refuses to be honest with his own. Or maybe they're just too complex for him to understand. Reflecting on Karen's situation, which Hanikawa filled him in on, he realizes that she had a point. His monologue about being strong was more so directed at himself. He believes his own ideals make him weak. His quickness to take responsibility for Karen's situation, even when he tells Karen that it's her own fault for getting involved with Kaiki. He believes he's to blame for letting her get involved, when really what could he have done? Without Oshino's influence on his deprecating self, it looks as if Koyomi's ideals won't progress. But maybe there's hope that can be found in other sources. Still, the problem at hand is his sister's illness, something that Shinobu offers a hand in helping with. Having been forced to listen to months of lectures from Oshino, Shinobu has a large database in her head on supernatural occurrences that is too convenient for Oshino not to have planted this. It seems like a parting gift to help Koyomi on his journey. She tells him that the bee comes from a tale of a plague that broke out in Japan. They wonder if Kaiki could have really brought out this supernatural bee when he considers himself a con man. It could be that this is a fake oddity.
偽物じゃからこそ本物よりも本物らしいということもあろう。
If a fake can do exactly what the real thing can, shouldn't it be considered more powerful? It's able to deceive you on whether it's real or fake while doing precisely what the real one can. Given the supernatural operates solely on the belief in them, as long as you believe that something did what you are thinking, you're manifesting the same outcome whether it's real or not. In a nutshell, it's a matter that is decided by whether or not you believe in its ability, not in whether or not it's a real thing or an indistinguishable fake. Your belief gives it power. As their conversation reaches a conclusion, Koyomi brings up spring break. Shinobu shutting him down, saying that's in the past. There's nothing they can do to change it. She will always hate him for making her live, and he will always hate her for what she's done. They reconcile at this, deciding to live till they die and leaving it at that. Karen tries to convince Koyomi she's fine when obviously that's far from the truth. She doesn't want him taking care of her, which in that case, she should have never got involved with Kaiki. They go back and forth on being right despite not being strong enough. Koyomi once again reiterating that being right is not enough. She wouldn't have froze when Kaiki questioned what made her right and him wrong if she was strong. He tells her she still has a lot of growing up to do, in which she responds that she's already an adult, trying to point at her boob size as proof, still thinking that growing up in strength is only found in the body, not the mind. Mayoi answers his predicament perfectly the next morning.
中学生が子供なのは当たり前ですけれど、自分が子供だと分かっていないところが問題なのです。
Before leaving, Koyomi has taken upon himself half of Karen's illness through a method Shinobu described to him, a symbol of the responsibility he feels for her condition, despite his only involvement in the whole B case, the fact that it's his sister. The talk of what it means to be an adult or a kid causes Koyomi to wonder when he himself will be considered an adult. Mayoi's response that as long as he thinks like that, he never will be. His sisters think of him as one, he himself doesn't know. Mayoi knowing he won't be until he stops thinking that every problem people have around him is somehow partially his fault. Mayoi reflects on herself, coining she's an adult in the mind, child in frame, which isn't too far from the mark given her extensive time reflecting as a ghost since her death. The two part ways at Hitagi's, Koyomi still wondering how real Mayoi is, still unsure whether she exists or not, likely somewhere in between. With 100 sharpened pencils, Hitagi plans to murder the con man that ruined her life, Koyomi talking her down from doing so, a wall of pencils separating the two, a physical representation of the wall within Hitagi's heart. Koyomi pours his own out to her, telling her that he loves her and he doesn't wish for her to go to jail over a past grudge. He tells her they'll go together and can protect each other, him keeping her out of prison, her protecting Koyomi from Kaiki's deceit. This confrontation more for Hitagi than anything, a hatchet she needs to bury in the past, yet was unable at the original time it took place due to her emotions being repressed by the crab, her rage for Kaiki finally appearing after the crab had returned her emotions. But before their confrontation with the ill-omened man, Koyomi must deal with her runaway sister. Obvious from her limp body under the freeway, Karen is in no condition to do anything, yet she pushes herself regardless in the name of a nuanced sense of justice.
他人のために動いている。誰かのために動いている。そこにお前たちの意志はない。
Karen is forced through her fight with Koyomi to recognize her weakness, her own lack of will. Koyomi refuses to fight back, maintaining a defensive role against her actions. She demands he admits defeat, which he refuses, resulting in her admitting loss after a long conversation about the Fire Sisters being fraudulent heroes. She knows that deep down, that they are standing on empty ground. Nothing they say is their own thoughts. They just play the role of fighters of justice like it's a game. They don't really know what it is. She questions why it matters if they're fakes, if they're in the right as Koyomi says they are. His response is nothing. She'll always be lesser to anyone with a stronger will, someone who has their own beliefs and morals. Even if they're wrong, they'll be stronger because they'll have a reason, something Karen faced against Kaiki. He takes her home and goes to meet Hitagi to end the issue with the con man. Kaiki admits defeat off the bat, telling Koyomi his sister was hypnotized and she'll recover in 3 days, regardless of what he does, telling Hitagi that he's sorry about her mom and he'll leave town. Hitagi points out that what he says is just hollow words and he agrees. He doesn't care, he just knows he's lost to them and doesn't need to fight to prove that. It's become more trouble than it's worth. Deep down, Kaiki does have emotions like every other living being, something again explored later on, but he's walled those out, choosing to pursue something that is unchanging and undying. Money. It will always bring satisfaction and never sadness, the more the better. So he avoids anything painful and thinks of himself as a pathetic con man, and not a good one at that, as he tells Koyomi. Kaiki too acknowledges that Karen was in the right when she visited him, and he shouldn't be too harsh on her for doing something kind. Her mistake though was coming to him alone. She wasn't strong in her beliefs, though there was someone that fits that picture, who could have been there if she was a little more patient. Kaiki sees his life as a dreary daily occurrence, nothing special nor dramatic, something he knows Hitagi thinks too. But Koyomi, he can tell, is different, sensing the presence from his shadow and the fact he took on half of his sister's fake illness. Kaiki makes clear he doesn't believe in the supernatural and doesn't want Koyomi to rope him into his delusions. Karen's bee was a hypnosis trick that Koyomi and her believed was real, so she got sick and Koyomi took on half the illness. Koyomi references the story Shinobu had told him about the bee. Kaiki retaliates, saying the story was a falsified tale in history believed to be true, so how could the bee exist?
幽霊を信じはしないが、幽霊を怖がるという人間の心理はわかるだろう。怪異など俺は知らない。しかし、怪異を知る者を知っている。
It only has power in the minds of those who manifest the bee into existence. If you don't believe, it simply doesn't exist. As he moves to leave, he tells Hitagi the man who assaulted her had died in a car crash. Simple as that. Nothing special or dramatic, and that's simply how he sees the world. As a canvas of gray with no reasoning to act with good nor bad intentions. He lies and tells Koyomi to not worry about him being Hitagi's first love, followed by him commenting that there is no truth in this world, a lie being just as equal to truth. Hitagi denies his claim. The idea that there is no truth to the world is a real ideology named factual relativism, very similar to skepticism. Truth is subjective and based on perspective, circumstances, and culture. It's only a few steps away from Oshino's belief in bounds, that each perspective and subjective have equal weight. But from the way Kaiki acts, he seems to favor the fake, the lies, seeing them as more powerful. If the fake can mask itself as the real thing, then it would have a greater value, something Koyomi finds himself agreeing with, though he adds one extra addition. He believes that there is a truth to this world, true justice. He just doesn't pretend to know it. Whatever is right or wrong is subjective. That is true. It's something to define for yourself, but that doesn't mean there isn't a fundamental right to the world. Deep in the unknown, there could be the thing known as truth, but that isn't how we can define the idea as of today. The truth we throw around is empty, full of holes built upon uncertainty, but somewhere outside our grasp as humans is the real thing. We may never know it. Maybe death will make it clear, maybe not. I'm not going to pretend to know, because none of us do. At the end of the day, all our values, our beliefs and morals contradict each other and even ourselves. Nobody remains true to themselves 24/7. We all fall from grace, but we can choose where we land and if we climb again. Karen and Tsukihi may be fakes, following a sense of justice they don't define, nor can they, but somehow that makes them closer to the real thing. Following an ideal with no explanation, just the word of justice to describe a feeling they've recognized as right, pure and righteous. One day they'll understand Koyomi's more shaded perspective, but for now their world remains black and white, and that's how it should be. They're still kids after all, whether they realize that or not. Karen tries to charm Koyomi into introducing her to Kanbaru, someone she looks up to for her ability. She tries to dress more cutesy and girly, being nice to her brother, which Koyomi's first reaction to is to wonder who's bullying her. This brings out a deeper issue that Karen faces. Over the years, anytime Karen would try to be more of a girl, Koyomi would instantly think that something's wrong with her. In her words, "Those words made me want to commit suicide." He still doesn't realize the strength his words have on his influential sister, and how they transformed her into a justice-seeking tomboy. a sister Karen believed Koyomi would be proud of, so she became just that. Regardless, the matter still stands. The tomboy Karen wants to meet the perverted lesbian Kambaru, and Koyomi, being his overprotective self, fears what Kambaru would do to her, so he plots a very strange game to put her to the test. One which no sane person would think of, and we're just going to gloss over. The takeaway here is the odd experience made them respect each other a little more. So, after a rigged game of rock, paper, scissors, Koyomi takes Karen to meet Kambaru while riding on her shoulders. From how she speaks and acts, this woman is sure to be another supernatural involved individual. Kagenui sets herself apart from the other two we've encountered though in values, placing a higher value on the real thing and claiming the fake is evil. But we're not going to get into that just yet. For now, she simply wants directions to the abandoned cram school, that which Koyomi gives over. Oddly, she calls the two by the names of the oddities that have entered their lives, almost like she has extensive research on each of them. Koyomi continues to procrastinate his studies, wandering around with Mayoi, encountering another strange individual, Yotsugi, who he gives directions once more to. His procrastination continues as he agrees to take Shinobu to the donut shop, Tsukihi telling him to study, which if she's the voice of reason, he's really pushing his luck. The two get on the topic of the Fire Sisters, Tsukihi sharing that she has no real interest in justice, no clear image of it like Karen or Koyomi does. She is just easily swayed by those around her, so she has faith in her siblings' way around it. Using the donuts as a bribe, Koyomi quizzes Shinobu on the two they encountered earlier. She tells him that Yotsugi, the doll-like one, was not a real human, and that's all the information his small payment of 10 donuts will get him. If he wants to know more, there's someone behind them that likely has the answers. A little angry he hasn't left yet, Kaiki assures Koyomi he'll be gone soon. He just had some minor business to attend to prior to leaving town. For the low payment of his entire wallet, Kaiki tells him that Kagenui and Yotsugi are the real deal compared to the con man he is. They actually hunt down the supernatural, specializing in the immortals. Despite claiming to not know them very well, he has a good amount of knowledge of them. Koyomi assumes that the pair is after him and Shinobu, given that they are partially immortal vampires, but that turns out to be off the mark. There are other immortal oddities, and one just so happens to be his little sister. A rage enseethes Koyomi, who tries to lash out only to be cool. Shinobu calms him, pointing out she's still alive. It seems she knew that his sister was the immortal Phoenix this entire time. Having took over the embryo that was within their mother, the bird was born as Tsukihi. Shinobu's negotiations gets the pair to back down for the next 24 hours to give Koyomi time to process. Kagenui's motives in the situation stem from her belief that Tsukihi is a fake that invaded a human family, and for that is evil and should be exterminated. The pair walks off, leaving Koyomi left questioning what it means to be family. What does it even mean to hold value? Why should the fake be worthless? Who defines what part of the fake is fake? At the end of the day, Tsukihi is still his sister, though she may have an immortal firebird within her. She may not be entirely of his blood, but that doesn't make her invaluable. He tries to find his answer in Karen.
月ちゃんのためには死ねるか
死ねる。笑いながら死んでやる。
He looks over his sister's face, reaching in to kiss. It felt weird, kissing his sister, and that's exactly what he expected, and proves in his mind that she is nothing but the real thing to him, even if others consider her a fake. It's an odd way to go about confirming this, but Koyomi is a rather odd individual. Shinobu and Koyomi confront the pair, Shinobu in a more powered state for the upcoming battle after receiving an extra helping of blood. Given that Kagenui craves violence, it's decided this disagreement will be settled through fist. Before they throw punches, she confirms the suspicion that she, Oshino, and Kaiki were university mates, having the same major and being in the same club. And it seems that Kaiki, the one who says he does not believe in the supernatural, was the one who sold information on Tsukihi being the immortal bird. Hypocrisy at its finest, something that Kagenui realizes about her own self here as well. She pushes for Koyomi to not force his own beliefs on others, his retaliation being that they're his family. He'll do anything he believes will protect and safeguard them, even if that's lying and hiding the secret that Tsukihi is a phoenix. He takes the burden of responsibility for her condition, although there's not a reason for him to do so. It's just the type of person he is. Her belief of the real thing being more valuable than the fake is rocked at Koyomi's acceptance of Tsukihi, and she's left to question if what she is doing is contrary to her own beliefs, pushing Koyomi to accept her take on fakes, pushing her own beliefs onto him. She reflects on a game Kaiki and her used to play. They had both believed in the theory of fundamental evil, an opposite to fundamental good, thinking of good as a pipe dream and the evil a reality, desire at the root of humanity. If we ride that theory, good would be considered hypocrisy, given it's underlined with desire, meaning there's no such thing as doing something out of the good of your own heart. It's just a surface level facade. But Kaiki had proposed that given if something is fundamentally evil, yet performs something good, then in its efforts to be the real thing, it is of greater good than that of something that was just good to begin with. Kagenui realizes this applies to this situation as well. In Tsukihi's attempts to be a sister and daughter, she is more of one than a run-of-the-mill child, despite her being a fake. She starts to feel weird and unmotivated in the current job. Koyomi's unwillingness to fight back contributing to that.
あなたが僕を人間扱いしてくれたからですよ。今まで推しの一人だけなんです。
Hitagi, Shinobu, Mayoi, Hanekawa. Anyone who knows about his vampiric abilities treats him like an immortal. Anytime he was injured, the only one who would be worried is Oshino. Hitagi only commenting on his recklessness, never actually worried. Hanekawa still sees him as an escape from her normal world, her friend who's a vampire. Yet since meeting, Kagenui had always referred to him as human, one with some slight side effects. This comforted him, gave him a sense that he wasn't the monster he thinks of himself as. And he thanks her. She decides to let things lie as is, something she remarks that Oshino would probably smile at. While Kaiki had believed the fake is worth more, and she always believed the real thing was, Oshino had always argued that they had equal worth. So here she is, doing something that he'd get a kick out of. To separate herself from the man, she decides to leave in a way that Oshino would never.
さようなら。
Koyomi's story of fakes has reached its conclusion, ending with the clear message of fake isn't invaluable. He has seen it firsthand, how one can be realer than the real thing in pursuit to be recognized as so. And it's a good closer to Nisemonogatari, but the story doesn't end there. Koyomi's growth as a person is still left unfinished. There are demons in his closets and in his shadows. He still holds a belief that he should take on the responsibility for everything around him, a result of a story buried deep within his past and present in his shadow reflected in his future. His friends still have their own issues to face. Except for Hitagi, no one has reached their personal resolutions. While their supernatural oddities may be at bay, they will once more bleed back into this world. The psychological issues that were their catalyst still unsolved. Koyomi's story has just begun, yet this video has just ended. There is still so much more to make sense of Monogatari, and much more will I explore soon.